Hi everyone, it's Simon here. Today we've got a quick tutorial on creating a Xpresso bar graph. This is in conjunction with the launch of our new pack, Graphs and Charts, which I'm very excited to work with Joran, which every single graph has got its own Xpresso control rig to make life much easier for you to build the data you need and to animate it. It's definitely worth checking out the video that Joran's made here. So today we're going to build something similar to this, where you have a control for each of these bars. So it's not complicated Xpresso, and it's a good introduction. Yep, here you go. This is the pack itself. So let's get stuck in. Now, personally, I find the best way of creating a bar graph is not using a primitive. The issues with this is as you scale this up, it goes in two directions under the floor as well. So, which is fine if you put a floor object on there, but I personally find this a little bit messy. So I'm going to quickly do the NURB option. Let's scale this down quickly. 25, 25, and you make sure it's pointing in the right direction. So it's pointing upwards. Hold down your Alt key, put it inside an extrude NURB, and let's make sure it's in the right direction. So this is your X, Y, and Z. Y is up, which is usually the second one. There we go. Right, so we're looking at Xpresso. And the thing with Xpresso is really it's cause and effect. You're creating some cause or some change in the scene, and that's going to have a knock-on effect on another object. So you can have something in the in the scene like this, or you can set up some user data. So first, I'm going to very quickly show you an object being the cause. And this is let's call this knob. So what we're going to do is, as this rotates on its H axis, so as I turn this around, you'll see the H axis data changes. As this rotates, we want this extrude to move up in its Y. So the first thing to do, let's just zero this because I can be a bit pedantic sometimes. Okay, so one thing to look out for in Cinema 4D is every time you see one of these dots, this is an animatable option. It also then becomes an option which you can use for Xpresso. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click on the H under Xpresso, set driver. So when you say set driver, that's your cause. Then what you need to do is your effect. So what we want to do is we want to increase this, increase the height of this. You could increase it via this, which is your height data, or if you want, or if you prefer, you can control the amount it extrudes through the NURB, which is my preference. So we're going to right click on here, Xpresso, set driven, which is your effect, part of the cause and effect. The difference between absolute and relative is, if for example here we're starting at 10, if you chose absolute and the rotation of this was on 0, this would also drop to 0. If you wanted it to start at 10, you choose relative, and then as you rotate it would add to that. So it doesn't really matter which one you choose, because you can change it again actually when you get your Xpresso tag up. So for now we're going to let's choose absolute. So we're going to double click on here, and here's what we call node-based programming. What we've got is, this is your cause, your rotation, that's your effect, and your range mapper here is how this data is being interpreted. And you connect each of these nodes with these little paths, which you can connect to other points as well. So you can do something quite complicated, but I prefer less is more. So let's just test this is working first. As this rotates, now you'll notice it's going off in a funny angle. The reason for this, as I mentioned before, there's not a single dot for each of these elements. So what we want to do is, under the range mapper, we want to change that to 0 and that to 0. And let's try it again. So now it should, fingers crossed, just go straight up. There we go. So that's one way of doing it. But what I find is a more elegant solution is to use user data. So I'm going to put this back to 1. Under control, where I'm going to create all my user data. Manage user data. You can just add data to the user data itself, or if you want to create your own tab, you can add a group, take it, drag it out of there, and give it a name. So we're going to call this controls. Whatever you do, don't press return or enter. It won't do any harm. It'll just, in fact, I'll show you what happens. It closes the window. So if you want to keep on adding more data, just keep adding data, but don't press return. Go call this value 1. And we're going to make this a float slider, which basically is one of these. And then we're going to copy this and paste it. And make sure you get your naming conventions right, because it'll make life easier for you later on. And paste again. Or you can control drag. There we go. And I'm also, well, leave that as that for now. Okay, so we also then need 4 bars. And name them quickly. 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to put them into a cloner. I'll explain why I'm doing this later, but for now, just bear with me. We've got 4 bars, and we don't want it going up. We want it going sideways. Right, so what we've got now is under this tab you've created, you've got 4 controls, and you've got 4 NURBs. Let's right click on the first value, Xpresso, like you did before, set driver, select your first NURB, right click, set driven absolute. Let's double check this. So once again, you need to change that to 0 and 0, because you only want it to go up and down, you don't want it to go sideways. And you'll notice this object is automatically pointing to 1. Now you can control drag this down, and you'll notice it's automatically switched to 2, but the control value is still on 1. So let's drag this down, click on the red output box, under the controls tab you made, select value 2, and drag it to here. Let's control drag down again, double click, it's automatically found the object for you, but it's got the wrong value, value 3. There we go. And do one more time, double click. It's automatically done number 4 for you. Controls, value 4. Right, before we go any further, let's just make sure everything's working the way it should. That's working, that's working, that's working, and that's working. Lovely. Now, if the scale isn't quite what you want, and you want it to go higher than that, that's easy to fix, but you'll need to fix all of them. So what I'd recommend is under your control, max this out to 100, double click on this, and in your range mapper in real time you can change the data. So say you wanted that 3 times higher, just change that to 300, and there you go. But you need to make sure you do that to all of them, or else you'll have one graph that's much bigger than the other. I think that's a bit too high. Let's try 200. That looks good. Let's make sure they're all consistent. So I'm going to change this for every range mapper. And last one to do. Okay, right. Now the reason why we had the cloner was to choose how many bars you want. Obviously you can create as many as you want, but within the cloner you need to have a separate NURB and its own controller. So that's why I've only done 4 for now, because it's just a quick tutorial. So under controls, or under control, under user data, click on there, manage user data, and make sure you've got this one here selected, or else it'll go into normal user data rather than your control tab. Add data, and we're going to call this number of bars. Right, and this time again we're going to use float slider, but instead of percentages we're going to use real, which means you can choose the actual physical range. So we want 1, 2, 4. Happy with that? Okay. So at the moment this isn't connected to anything. So once again, this is going to be our cause. So right click, Xpresso, set driver. This is going to affect the cloner. So let's change the count, right click, Xpresso, driven, absolute. So at the moment we've got 1, change that, we've got 2, 3, and 4. Okay, now a couple more things I'm going to show you. Next one is rounding. Now at the moment that's looking very, very sharp, but you might want a slight bevel on there. And as you've got, it's a nub rather than a primitive, you need to do it in 2 stages. So under control, user data, manage user data, make sure we've got the right tab selected, add data, and we're going to call this rounding. Again, I'm going to use a float slider. 1 to 100, that's fine. And the 2 things we're going to control is the rounding of the spline, which is here. I'll set that to 0. Bear in mind you keep note of that figure, that's its sort of maximum curve, that's 12.5. I'll set that to 0 for now. And the other thing we're going to curve is the cap. But first let's do this one. So we'd ready, right click, Xpresso, set driver. Under here, where we've got the radius of the rounding, right click, set driven, absolute. And that's created a new little Xpresso tab for you there. Double click on it, and we want the maximum to be 12.5, which was that figure before. So now, fingers crossed, there we go. Now, you'll notice only one of them was rounding then. All you have to do is hold down Control and drag this Xpresso to the other splines as well. And now, fingers crossed. Oh, I know why that's not working. That selects them all. And make sure rounding is on all of them. There we go. Let's try that again. There we go. But as you'll notice, it's only rounding the outside, it's not rounding the top. So the other thing we're going to have to control now is the cap. So select all of them, and we want to, I think that's the top there, fillet cap, yep. And we don't want them to get fatter as we bevel them, so let's go to constrain. And we want it to look a bit softer than that, so let's at least give it 5. I'm feeling generous, let's make it 10. There we go, a bit smoother. And let's just see how far we can take it before it starts going a bit funky. There, see, it's actually making a bit of a mess there, but let's just make sure it's at maximum value first. There we go, that's better. So we can get to about 12 radius. Put that back to 0. So once again, to control, right click on rounding, Xpresso, set driver, select these, and where you got your radius, right click, set driven, absolute. Now at the moment it's trying to give you a radius of 100, which is way too high, and so we need to fine tune that. Now you'll notice as I select, there's more than one Xpresso here, and when I select on them, it gives you a kind of indication of what that particular Xpresso controller is doing. So this is what we want. It's called rounding, and rather than change it 4 times, I'm going to change it once, then copy it to the others. Okay, so you got your control, which is your cause, or your driven, and that's your output, and I think we said the maximum we want is 12. So it is this little one down here. So we'll set 10. There we go. And now let's control, drag that down to this one, and this one. So let's just test this before we move on. There we go. I quite like a little bit of bevel, but not too much. So I think that looks pretty cool. So we're nearly there. We've created these 4 bars, which are independently controlled with the 4 values. We control the number of bars, and we can add some curve appeal. The final thing I'm going to show you is how to create a text that's animated by these sliders. So I'm going to use MoText. Let's scale this down so it's a similar sort of size to the bar. Hold down Shift so we can move it in increments of 10 degrees. Hold down Shift again. Let's move it back. It's still a little bit big. There we go. Right, so the other thing we'll want to do is we'll want the text to only appear if the bar appears. So what I'm going to do is going to put each of these in its own null. So hold down Alt and then G, which creates a group with just the one thing in. And then I'm going to drop that text in there, hold down Control, drag it to the next null, and the next null, oops, oh, held too many things there, next null, and the next null. There we go. So now each bar has got its own bit of text. And now what we're going to do is, under our controls, right click on there, set driver, select your first text, under object, right click on the text, set driven, absolute. And then you could repeat the process for each bar. So you just right click on there, but there's one thing I have to show you first before we do that. Now as we change this in the scene, you'll notice that the numbers are going up nicely, there's no decimal places. But if, for example, we animate this, so let's add a keyframe there, move this up a bit, and add another keyframe there, what can happen is you'll get, lots and lots and lots of horrible decimal places, which just looks messy. I mean, if that's what you want, great. But if that's not what you want, let's change this. So under our Xpresso, there's our control, there's our range mapper, and there's our text. Now for this time we need to put another node in between. And what this one does, it's under node Xpresso adapter universe, and we want to change to integer. All this does is it controls the decimal places. So change that node to there, and that one to there. And now when we animate, fingers crossed, there we go, it's behaving. So now what we need to do is we need to add this Xpresso to the other bits of text, but we also need to change the control. So that's number 2. And this is why naming conventions are very important, or else this gets very confusing. Number 3. And finally, number 4. There we go. So we have all our bars working. We don't have any horrible decimal places. We can add some curve appeal, and we can control the number of bars we've got. And there we go, bar charts. So one final thing which you can do, which only really works for simpler rigs like this one. If you've got a really complicated rig, it'll take up all your desktop space. But if you hold down Control, select all these objects, controls rather, right click, add to HUD, hold down Control, move it to where you want, and you can have it so it shows always. Or if you don't want that, let's remove that. Add to HUD. If you've got a lot of data, this might be more suitable. This information will only come up when you select the object. There we go. And you can still set up animation, so click on there, change the timeline a bit. There we go, change the timeline. There we go, all working. Brilliant. Right, well, I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate in asking, and enjoy the pack. Bye for now.